Hey everyone, it's Neil from Heavyocity, and it's great to be back with you. We're going to take a look at my track from our newest product called Damaged Guitars. For me, this product was one of the most exciting we've ever created, largely because I'm a longtime guitarist who used to play and tour in a metal band. That was a long time ago. Regardless, to be able to take my time to experiment, to create the sound of Damaged Guitars, to make a virtual instrument that's never been done like this before, was my dream project. Through extensive exploration, it became somewhat of a journey to find inspiring guitar tones. I was researching the latest gear, buying new guitars, and a crazy amount of guitar pedals. They kept showing up every week at the studio, and I was getting dirty looks. While the humble beginnings of Damaged Guitar was initially just a concept, over time it turned into a huge collection of very inspired riffs, effects, playable guitars, and bass, recorded with the highest quality gear available. Outside of recording the coolest riffs I could come up with, the minimum criteria was that they had to feel real, like riffs you'd hear on a finished album. It would also be useful for composing and scoring, because hey, that's what we do. I started with a custom shop Jackson guitar, tuned super low through a hot-rodded amp by Friedman that just rips, and I used a boutique boost pedal and 7 distortion stomp boxes to dial the monster tone. I didn't use them all at once. Over the course of a couple of months, I had created 48 double-track riffs in drop A. That's really low for you non-guitar players. When I picked up my standard E-tuning guitars, that's where I really got creative with the tone. I was obsessed experimenting with different guitar pedals in different orders and different amps to come up with uniquely heavy tones and clean tones. Some are pretty metal sounding, some have more of a retro fuzz vibe, which is fun, a bunch that might fit in an aggressive John Wick soundtrack, and some that were inspired by Rage Against the Machine meets Guns N' Roses, and definitely some Slipknot vibes. As the weeks and months progressed, I started to amass a huge arsenal of guitar riffs in 3 keys, with all sorts of variation and vibes. As my journey continued, I began unearthing rich, clean guitar tones using a very high-end Stratocaster, a Telecaster, a Gibson ES335, which is a semi-hollow body, a Gibson Firebird, and a bunch of PRS guitars, with a different lineup of pedals and amps. This next batch of recordings resulted in a whole series of chimey clean tones and super ambient guitars we call blooms. They're very soul-stirring and emotional. There's a whole lot more in there too, like bass lines that match every riff, and tons of guitar and bass effects, chugs, and more to unlock your inner guitar god. That was marketing's line. Thanks, Jess. Okay, I'm tired of talking about this. Let's just hear this already. Let's do this. Let's go. All right, cool. Lots going on there. Why don't we take a look at the parts? So this starts off with one of the blooms that I was talking about, and that's like a super ambient, clean guitar through a really cool effects chain of giant reverbs, long delays, modulation, and stuff like that. So this part. So inside of Damaged Guitars, you can see here it says Blooms, Blooms 2, and then I've got this Clean Effects in reverse. If you click, there's an entire menu. And I chose the key of D. This is probably the least metally of the three. There's also A, which is below this D, and then F sharp below the A, which gets super heavy. Not to tear any faces off, I figured D would be a good place to start. You know, heavy guitars, 1, 2, 3, 4. The bass, which is following exactly what the guitar is doing. We've got clean guitars, 1, 2, 3, and 4, all again in the key of D. There are clean effects, which were created with each of these clean guitars, and that's what you're hearing right now. It's just these effects in reverse. I like that sound. And then there's all sorts of things. The blooms, which we're using here. There's guitar bits, which are like segments of riffs that have sort of been remixed. The bass following the exact same thing, so you can use them. There's chunks, which are like chugs, eighths in 30-second patterns, as well as a whole bunch of guitar effects like slides, squeals, bends, and then menus that sort of, it gives you a bit of everything to use. A bit of a slide, you got a bend, stuff like that. Same with the bass, and then there's more stuff like combos. So back here, the first thing we heard was a clean effects in reverse, this, and then this other patch, which is a bloom. Those are really pretty. There's a ton of those. A lot of flavors. They're very sort of subtle, just sort of emotion evoking. That's part of the intro, and it's also supported by a playable guitar. So I'll play those two together. And that's sort of setting up the intro. There's also, under the playables, these cool distortion-y pads, which I used sort of as a swell. So from here, and that's rhythmic, and then it goes into octave lower, building the vibe. So in context, you get your blooms and your reverses, supportive guitar, rhythmic, dirty. Build. So let's take a look at that. Here we have clean guitar. So that is a mixture of two things in the same guitar patch. So there's these three channels, and you can load them up with clean guitar or dirty guitar, clean guitar with clean effects, clean guitar with clean bass, dirty guitar with dirty bass. It's pretty versatile. Or you can just split it up where one NKI in this particular key of D is just guitar stuff, and then it's just heavy guitar stuff, and then it's bass and bass effects. We've done quite a bit of snapshots for you already, and I sort of built stuff off of those that worked for what I wanted to create for this demo. So if we take a listen to this, you're going to hear clean guitar. So this will tell you it's called Kryptonite. And then there's the effects that go with it. And the cool thing is you can mix those at whatever level you want underneath the other guitar. And again, that's one of 48 clean guitar vibes. So there's a whole ton of them in here. And each of those guitar phrases, you know, they're looped, they work at different tempos, have like a companion, so to speak, effects layer, which is not baked in. So it's kind of cool that you can use them on their own. Underneath, you can really push them up loud, whatever sort of works. We wanted everything to be really tweakable, and it is. Like I mentioned in the intro, there are all these bass lines that are partnered up with all the clean, all the dirty, a lot of the riffs. There's even slides and all that stuff. So this is the bass with it. So I added a slide into this line, so it's a very simplistic bass line supporting the guitar. And then the track builds a bit more, starting at bar 19. Let's unsolo. So to check this section out, again, it's the clean guitars. I chose a different one for this to sort of start to build. Which is that rhythmic, a little bit dirty, atmospheric thing, which is neat. And then we start to get into some of the fun, chunky stuff. These we could take a look at. One is bass, one is guitar. So if we just solo those, you'll hear what is going on. 2, 3, 4. There's a lot of delay on that, but with the drums playing, which I'll get into in a minute, and the main sort of clean guitar, it just fits in. So this whole section, it really starts to ramp up. Energy is high. If we take a quick look. And then the riff changes. I didn't have these soloed, but those are the chunks, so I used them to sort of break up the riff, you know, because these riffs, you can filter them and change them and just use part and switch to another. And these chunks are really helpful at like answering a phrase or just doing rhythmic support. There's a ton of uses. So I haven't talked about this yet at all, but during the creation of this product, I was writing drum grooves to play some of these guitar riffs to. Some of them were an outline, and then as I would just sort of review what I had before I wrote more, I would tweak them and really get them to work. I was like, this would be a great thing to add to the product because you've got cool guitar riffs in stereo, you've got like really well played bass that's following the riffs, and then you've got drum grooves. So there's literally companion bass part and drum grooves in this other product right here called Damage Rock Grooves. There are folders under Damage Guitar Grooves, and you see the different keys. We're in D, so there's all sorts of breakouts for the clean drums and the heavy drums. I'm not going to talk too much. I'll just play the groove in this case. They're pretty fun, and like in our engine, you've got, you know, this octave of kick loops, and then the next octave is snare and tom stuff, and then hi-hats and crashes on the third octave. And you can tweak the level of those, panning, tuning, sends to the effects. You're not just stuck with, oh, it's a loop. There's a lot that you can play around with. You can change to a different hi-hat or, you know, open hi-hat pattern if you don't like it for that particular loop. You can change it all up, which is pretty versatile and cool. So if we add in the chunks, I just loaded in our Damage drum kit. That's where all these rock grooves came from, and just did a few fills here and there, and you can see that. So I'll play that. Nice and chunky. There are also a lot of effects that I did. I talked a bit about this already. I think if we back up, we will experience some stuff from the guitar effects. Here we go. They're pretty fun. They definitely work. There's slides and bends and pinch harmonics and all sorts of crazy stuff to make it feel more authentic and customize your grooves that you choose. There's a whole other folder, which I'll open it a bit. It's playing. It's just extra doodads, piano, doubling a melody, or a sub hit here and there, and then a synth part just to, you know, create this more of as a track, not just, hey, here's a bunch of guitar parts. So if we unsolo this section, and then we can go into the next. Going on in that section, but we jump back into the clean guitars. If we check this out, it's one of the blooms that was recorded directly into these effects, and they loop. Again, there are a bunch of those that we heard before. So I doubled that track, and then I did a little fill that was fun. Essentially taking the same bloom sound and then using the engine to automate it to sound smaller. It's a nice, effective way to make a break. I basically just muted with volume the riff here and then had this playing so they were in sync, and then dropped that in. Where are we here? There we go. So if we play this, just to change up the rhythm, instead of using another cool loop, which I could have, I wanted to show off what you can do with the chunks. And again, it's like sort of this, you know, you know, you can make your own riffs, which is pretty damn cool. So from 47, I'll just solo those. There are some delay effects on it, but pretty effective, I think. It's supporting the build of the clean into the next section. And then there's some like Vocalese 3 sort of ambient stuff in the background, which sounds kind of ethereal and cool. This particular drum groove goes along. Those guitars go away and we sort of vamp into this next section of heavy awesomeness. And it goes out with some Bumblebee Buzzy synthesizer. All right, so this last section, you know, we're hearing the heavy guitars. There are a bunch of cool guitar effects. Why don't we take a closer look at those? So those are fun. You're hearing me use some of those in there, and the drums are kicking along, and the track sort of goes out back into soul stirring, if you will, vibe. So let's just see what's happening in the end here. So we have another bloom. And again, there's a ton of those. All sorts of flavors. Those are in the key of D and the key of A. And it's supported by some of the playables. This one is called Los Angeles. It's just a subtle add to the melody and this heavy guitar part, which is like this sort of opening up wash in the end, used for vibe purposes only. I've used the word vibe at least 300 times in this video. Sorry about that. And it's out. So just to double back on a couple of the things that are also happening. A lot's going on with the drums, and those are all the partnered up drums that I showed about halfway through. Those grooves are really pretty awesome to have and just be like, oh, cool, this clean riff goes with this dirty riff, and it's very clearly marked. So if you were to get the partnered product of Damaged Rock Grooves, I showed you this before, but this, for instance, says clean D. We're in the key of D, breakout, and I just tweaked it a bit, so I saved this snapshot as Neil. If we go to the beginning of the track, so here's a good example of there's a loop playing, and it's literally just the hi-hat loop of the whole groove. We got kicks and snares, and then the whole thing kicks in. And again, I used our Damaged drum kit just to customize them a little bit. And then a fill. It's right into the rock grooves. You can see kick, snare, and hat are all lighting up. And you can make your own. You can just drag D heavy onto the first set of key banks, like here. Go to mids, grab some snares, mix and match, do whatever you want. Okay, let's carry on here. I touched on this a bit before, but here is a Damaged Rock Groove loop mixed with the drum kit, and I stopped it to make this big sort of fill. Right here. And since those grooves were made from the kit, they really partner well. Damaged Guitars is a very versatile and diverse collection of beautiful sounding instruments, recorded through a ton of interesting guitar pedals and classic tube amplifiers. It's a true collection of inspired guitar riffs in 3 keys, with tones ranging from crunchy and dirty to crystal clean and ambient. I hope you enjoyed this track walkthrough for Damaged Guitars. Please hit like and subscribe so you're in the know for the latest and greatest stuff coming out of Heavyocity. Again, thanks for watching, and take care.